March 1945. A German commander stares, stunned, as reports confirm a Black American tank unit has smashed through the Siegfried Line, fortifications once thought unbreakable. For Nazi officers, this is impossible. But the 761st Tank Battalion is already sweeping forward, defying every racist myth and rewriting the battlefield in real time. How did these overlooked soldiers, repeatedly underestimated by their enemy, upend the course of World War II? Here are 10 times Nazis made that fatal mistake. Dawn broke over the hills near Bobenthal as the 761st Tank Battalion prepared to move. Their Shermans lined up behind engineers who crept ahead, clearing mines under the cover of darkness. Battalion radio logs crackled with coded orders. Company A would lead, Company B in reserve. The Siegfried Line, a wall of pillboxes, dragon's teeth, and barbed wire, loomed ahead. Fortifications built to outlast armies, now the last barrier to Germany's heartland. By 5 a.m., the first tank engines rumbled forward. Machine gun fire erupted from concrete bunkers. Lieutenant Kingsley dismounted, sprinting through mud and debris to direct fire. Sherman guns barked, shells smashing into pillbox after pillbox. Infantry rushed behind, ducking as mines exploded in the ditches. At 6:22, pillbox number 3 fell silent, its defenders killed or captured. A tank hit a mine and ground to a halt, but the crew scrambled out, covered by suppressing fire as engineers worked to clear the road. Every minute counted. German artillery zeroed in, lobbing shells that sent dirt and shrapnel flying. By midday, the 761st had punched a hole through the Siegfried Line. Enemy lines broke. Surrendering German troops streamed past stunned military police. Battalion reports counted 8 enemy guns destroyed, 250 prisoners taken, and a string of fortified positions reduced to rubble. Task Force Rhine pressed forward, tanks weaving through mountain passes and shattered defenses. The battalion's cohesion held under fire. Platoon commanders relayed coordinates, gunners picked out enemy armor, and engineers risked everything to keep the column moving. In the days that followed, the 761st swept through more than 30 towns, liberating villages and forcing German units into retreat. Their actions would later earn the presidential unit citation, but on that March morning, recognition was the last thing on anyone's mind. The only goal was to keep moving, to turn the impossible into fact. Black tank crews breaching the line that was never supposed to fall. December 1944 brought a sudden, brutal turn in the Ardennes. The 761st Tank Battalion, already worn from weeks of combat, received new orders, reinforced the crumbling American lines as German armor surged through the snow-choked woods. The roads vanished under drifts, engines sputtered in the cold, and tank crews wrapped themselves in blankets, waiting for the next move. Bastogne was nearly surrounded. Allied supply routes buckled under the weight of the German advance. The only hope lay with relief columns, among them the Black Panthers, rolling east on icy roads, every mile contested by enemy fire and hidden mines. At Tillet, the battalion's Shermans advanced alongside the 87th Infantry, tasked with seizing a crossroads vital for the Bastogne corridor. 11 tanks reached the outskirts. By nightfall, only 2 remained unscathed. German panzers and anti-tank guns hammered the column, but the 761st pressed on, shells bursting in the tree line, machine guns rattling from the frozen brush. Platoon leaders barked orders through static-filled radios, crews loaded rounds with numb fingers, and medics scrambled to treat wounds in the back of half-tracks. Frostbite and exhaustion gnawed at the men, yet the line held. The battle for Tillet raged for 3 days. Field reports recorded 2 burning Panther tanks and dozens of German prisoners. Allied engineers cleared the road under fire, keeping the supply route open to Bastogne. German situation summaries from the sector reference unexpected armored resistance, at first misattributing the attackers to French or Moroccan units. Only after interrogations did the truth spread. Black American tankers had stopped the advance. When the fighting ended, the 761st's battered column limped back to refuel and rearm, leaving behind shattered armor and stunned enemy survivors. Their stand at Tillet forced the Germans to abandon their timetable, buying precious days for the encircled defenders of Bastogne. In the Ardennes snow, the Panthers had proven their mettle once again, adapting under fire, holding ground when collapse seemed certain, and earning trust that would echo through the rest of the war. March 24, 1945. Over the skies near Berlin, the Luftwaffe's newest jets, Messerschmitt Me-262s, raced toward the bomber stream, engines shrieking at nearly 540 miles per hour. German pilots had been briefed. The Americans' so-called Red Tails were just another segregated escort group, flying older P-51 Mustangs, no match for jet power. But as the Me-262s swept in, the Tuskegee Airmen's formation shifted. Major Roscoe Brown, leading the flight, spotted the silver streaks diving from altitude. He broke off, banking low and tight, drawing a jet into a turning fight that should have favored the German. Instead, Brown's Mustang held the inside track. He squeezed the trigger. A burst of .50 caliber fire tore through the jet's engine cowling. The Me-262 spiraled down in flames. 2 more jets fell that day, each brought down by disciplined teamwork and precise flying. Ultra intercepts later captured German pilots' shock. How had prop-driven Mustangs outmaneuvered the Reich's wonder weapons? Luftwaffe logs from Jagdgeschwader 7 recorded abrupt losses and a warning: avoid low-altitude dogfights with Red Tail escorts. The Tuskegee Airmen's tactics, tight formation, aggressive pursuit, relentless focus, had shattered expectations. Their unit earned the Distinguished Unit Citation for the Berlin mission, and the myth of technological invincibility crumbled in the face of skill. For the first time, German commanders began to treat the Red Tails as a special threat, not an afterthought. The legend of the Tuskegee Airmen was now impossible to ignore. January 1944 brought the 99th Fighter Squadron, rookies to the Italian front, face to face with the Luftwaffe's best. Their P-40 Warhawks, battered and outdated, climbed into the winter sky above Anzio. Below, the battle for the beachhead raged, but in the clouds, a different contest played out. 15 Black American pilots squaring off against a swarm of Focke-Wulf 190s, the pride of German engineering. Radio chatter snapped with warnings as the Germans dove from altitude, cannons blazing. Lieutenant Charles Dryden called the turn, and the squadron wheeled into a tight defensive circle. Outnumbered and outgunned, the 99th fought with discipline drilled in at Tuskegee, covering each other's tails, never breaking formation. In the chaos, Flight Officer Leonard Jackson picked out a Focke-Wulf closing on his wingman. He rolled, lined up his sights, and fired. The German fighter burst into flames, spiraling out over the mountains. Minutes later, another Warhawk caught an enemy in a climbing turn. 6 German planes fell that day, 4 more limped away trailing smoke. After-action reports from both sides confirmed the tally. U.S. commanders who had doubted the squadron's readiness now faced the facts. The 99th had bested the Luftwaffe in a straight fight. Word spread through Allied airfields. These pilots were more than a social experiment. They were a force to reckon with. The victory over Anzio would echo far beyond Italy, forcing a new respect from friend and foe alike. July 18, 1944. The 332nd Fighter Group, better known as the Red Tails, formed up over southern France. Their assignment: escort bombers to targets deep behind enemy lines. Bomber crews scanned the sky for the men with crimson tails, a sight that had started to mean safety on the long haul home. German fighters, Focke-Wulf 190 and Bf 109, rose to meet them, banking in from the sun, expecting another easy run at the bombers. But the Red Tails held their formation, tight and disciplined, weaving a moving shield around the vulnerable bombers. The first attack came fast. Lieutenant Lee Archer spotted a German fighter diving in and called out the threat. In seconds, the Tuskegee pilots broke off, pounced, and turned the tables. One after another, German aircraft fell. Mission logs from the day credit the 332nd with 6 confirmed kills, some accounts say as many as 12, without losing a single bomber in their care. Gun camera film and after-action reports confirmed the tally. When the bombers landed, crew after crew asked for Red Tail escorts on future missions. Bomber Captain Charles McGee later said, "When we saw those Red Tails, we relaxed." The word spread across airfields in Italy and France. The best protection in the sky came from pilots the Army once doubted. The Red Tails record, 12 enemy fighters destroyed, 0 bombers lost, became the proof that prejudice could not ignore. On that day, skill and courage rewrote the rules of respect. Night blanketed the Apennines as the 92nd Infantry Division, the Buffalo Soldiers, prepared to move. Orders filtered down. Take the ridgeline above Massa, crack the German Gothic Line, and open the road to the Po Valley. Fifth Army planners had doubted whether the division could hold under pressure. Internal memos, now declassified, questioned if these men, segregated, overlooked, could succeed where others had stalled. Yet as dawn crept over the peaks, company commanders called their men forward, rifles slung, boots grinding into rock and mud. The Germans had spent months fortifying these mountains, trenches, machine gun nests, and fields laced with mines. Elite units from the 16th SS Panzer Grenadiers waited above, confident that the Buffalo Soldiers would break and fall back. Instead, the assault began with a steady, uphill push. Platoons scrambled over loose shale, ducking bursts of MG-42 fire. Sergeant John Fox's unit inched forward, calling for artillery on hidden bunkers. Engineers crawled ahead, probing for mines with bayonets. When the line stalled, officers stood up in the open, waving their men forward. By midday, the first ridge fell. After-action reports tallied German dead and prisoners, noting the speed of the advance. Fifth Army observers watched as black infantrymen pressed on, refusing to yield ground even as casualties mounted. German field reports, intercepted days later, described unexpectedly fierce resistance and enemy-colored troops overrunning strongpoints. By nightfall, the Buffalo Soldiers had punched through the Gothic Line in their sector. The mountain barrier cracked, and Allied armor began to flow into the Po Valley. In the days that followed, the 92nd would keep pushing north, their achievement forcing both enemies and skeptics to reconsider everything they thought they knew about these men. The ridges of northern Italy bore silent witness to a victory that official reports could not ignore. Engines rumbled to life before sunrise as convoys assembled at the edge of the Normandy hedgerows. The Red Ball Express, a 700-mile lifeline, stretched from the beaches to Patton's front lines. Nearly 3/4 of its drivers were black soldiers, many barely out of high school, now responsible for moving 12,000 tons of fuel, ammunition, and food every day. Convoy sergeants mapped out night routes, dodging German patrols and roadblocks. Drivers swapped stories about near misses, bullets pinging off hoods, tires shredded by shrapnel, headlights doused at the first sign of enemy aircraft. Some nights, the only protection came from empty fuel drums welded to truck doors or a lucky rabbit's foot dangling from the dash. Orders pressed them forward. No delays, no excuses. If the truck stopped, the tank stalled, and the advance ground to a halt. Patton's armored columns waited at crossroads, engines idling, crews scanning the horizon for the next supply run. Veterans later recalled the pressure. Trucks lined up bumper to bumper, headlights blacked out, moving in a ghostly procession through rain and mud. Every delivery meant another push east, another German position overrun. Eisenhower would later say the entire Allied advance depended as much on these rolling supply lines as on the guns at the front. In the shadows behind the breakthroughs, black drivers kept the war machine moving, their work as relentless as the fighting itself. Salt spray stung the faces of the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion as their landing craft ground onto Omaha Beach. The ramp dropped, and men leapt into surf churned by machine gun fire and mortar blasts. They dragged heavy gas canisters and balloon winches through the sand, dodging shell fragments and the bodies of men who hadn't made it past the waterline. Orders came fast: get the balloons up, keep them flying, no matter what. Each team worked quickly, anchoring steel cables and inflating the silver giants that would soon hang overhead. The balloons climbed into the gray sky, their cables forming a deadly web that forced German pilots to think twice before diving low for a strafing run. Within hours, the 320th line of balloons stretched across both Omaha and Utah beaches. Luftwaffe pilots, already outnumbered and harried by Allied fighters, now faced a new hazard. One wrong move and a wing could shear off, sending a plane tumbling into the surf. After-action reports from the first day noted a sharp drop in low-level attacks wherever the balloons flew. Some German planes tried to press through, only to be driven higher, straight into the teeth of Allied anti-aircraft fire. Despite the chaos, the balloon crews held their ground. Several men were wounded, but not one position was abandoned. Their work shielded landing craft and medics, giving the infantry a fighting chance to cross the open sand. For the men of the 320th, there was little time to consider the irony. A unit once labeled unfit for combat now stood as the only all-black battalion on D-Day's front line, quietly saving lives with every balloon that rose above the storm. The morning air near Gebling carried the crack of rifle fire and the distant thud of artillery as Staff Sergeant Reuben Rivers' tank lurched to a halt. A German mine had torn through the hull, leaving Rivers wounded but unshaken. Smoke curled from the engine as his crew scrambled for cover, pinned by machine gun bursts and the threat of another anti-tank shell. Orders from the battalion were clear. The column had to move. The road ahead was blocked by debris and a fortified German position that had already stalled two other tanks. Rivers, bleeding and barely able to stand, refused evacuation. He waved off the medics and climbed from the wreck, pistol in hand, shouting for his men to follow. Under a hail of fire, he cleared the roadblock himself, drawing enemy fire so his platoon could push forward. Crewmen later recalled his voice cutting through the chaos, steady, insistent, impossible to ignore. Rivers' actions broke the stalemate, allowing the column to advance and the mission to continue. Minutes later, a direct hit from an anti-tank gun ended his life. For decades, his story lingered in the memories of those he led. An act of courage that cost everything, opening the way for others to press on. In 1997, Rivers was finally awarded the Medal of Honor, his sacrifice no longer hidden in the footnotes of war. The Enns River shimmered beneath the battered hulls of Sherman tanks as the 761st Tank Battalion rolled into Steyr, Austria. Forward scouts radioed back. Soviet armor had reached the far bank, red stars painted on their turrets. For months, Allied High Command tracked the race to Berlin. But here, at a quiet crossing, history arrived without ceremony. Signal Corps footage later captured the moment. Black American tankers climbing from their vehicles, boots caked with mud, approached Soviet crewmen whose uniforms bore the dust of the Eastern Front. Language barriers broke under laughter and handshakes. A battered field table appeared, and someone produced vodka. Diaries from the battalion's officers recall a shared toast, one side in English, the other in Russian, marking the collapse of the German armies caught between them. By dusk, German soldiers streamed from hiding, surrendering by the hundreds. The formal meeting of US and Soviet armor at Steyr closed a circle the Nazis never believed possible. Black American soldiers, once dismissed as unfit for frontline combat, stood at the heart of Europe's final reckoning. Their presence helped seal the fate of the Reich, and for a brief moment, the boundaries of race, language, and ideology faded in the celebration of victory. By the end of World War II, over 1 million African Americans had served in the U.S. military. Yet documents from the era show that Nazi and German commanders repeatedly dismissed their abilities, until the evidence proved otherwise. From the 761st Tank Battalion's breakthrough at the Siegfried Line to the Tuskegee Airmen downing Germany's most advanced jets, these units consistently overturned both enemy and Allied prejudice. The 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion's role at D-Day and the Red Ball Express's relentless supply runs further demonstrated skill under fire. Still, many official records and personal testimonies remain classified or were lost, leaving unanswered questions about the full scope of black soldiers' contributions and the decisions behind delayed recognition. Today, military historians agree that these examples forced a re-examination of both Nazi ideology and U.S. segregationist policies. The documented achievements of Black American soldiers stand as clear proof. When given the chance, they met, then exceeded, every challenge on and off the battlefield.